Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Big Dreams, Great Teams podcast. I'm Paula Maidens, your CEO and team advisor, hiring strategist, and leadership coach. Today, we're diving into something that I see every single day with my clients, a common mistake that leads you to feeling like your team, or maybe it's just one person on your team, doesn't get it. Now, what if I told you that the single most powerful leadership tool that you already possess is probably the one you're using the least? I'm going to share with you why telling your team what to do is actually holding you and them back, and how a simple shift from telling to asking can completely transform your team's performance and your day-to-day experience as a business owner. Now, this is not just some sort of nice theory that doesn't actually work. This works. And this is something that I've been using with my clients for the last 15 years. And this approach will cut your problem-solving time completely in half and dramatically reduce those frustrating thoughts of, oh my goodness, why are we dealing with this again? Why am I having this conversation again? It really, really helps just to reduce and eliminate that, which I know completely drains your energy as a business owner. So stay with me. This episode is all about why great leaders ask rather than tell. Let's dive in. Okay, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you're the only person in your business who can solve problems? Does it feel like if you don't step in and fix something, it won't get fixed? Do you ever feel like you've told somebody something so many times till you're blue in the face and you're completely exacerbated because they still aren't doing it or they just don't get it? Or maybe you've had the experience of explaining the same thing, the same process over and over again to your team, or maybe it's to someone on your team and it's driving you a little bit crazy. Or that cycle where you step in, fix a problem, and a week later, you're dealing with the same issue again or a slight variation, which you would have thought would have been picked up given last week's experience. So for many business owners that I work with, they feel like these are daily norms that they have to deal with. And they feel like they become the bottleneck in the flow or the process or the rhythm of their business because everything needs their input, their approval, or their review. And of course, your time is stretched so thin across so many things in the business, and you find yourself stuck and caught in a loop where the business workflow or the operational workflow involves and relies on you far too much. Nothing can move forward. And that's, this reality, I guess, is what means that you constantly feel like you need to be online, checking in, including on holidays and weekends. So, of course, what's your natural response if you're feeling like this? It's, well, let me just tell you what to do. Let me tell you how to do this so we can all move on from this situation as quickly as possible because your time's short. So, of course, it feels efficient. It feels like the fastest way to get through this situation, and time is not on your side. And typically, if you know the answer, you know the thing that should be done, you know what the person should do, then of course it feels obvious. Why not just tell them? But here's what's happening behind the scenes if you find yourself continually doing this. Every time you do this, every time you tell someone the answer, you actually create dependency, not growth. And I know you didn't start a business to become the center point of that business and the permanent answering machine for every question that someone on your team has when they can't think without you. So let's break down why telling seems faster, but actually telling creates long-term inefficiencies in your business. Because when you default to telling, you create what I call a just tell me what to do culture. You've probably experienced it, team members who are constantly at your door, in your email, on your Slack, asking what they should do next, how they should fix something. And it's almost like they're bouncing things back to you. Oh, I tried to do this and this happened. What do you think? And they may not actually be explicitly saying, tell me what to do, but it's what do you think? What do you think? So it's almost coming to you for reassurance or approval, just asking how they should handle and move forward. So on the surface, it could feel like, they're being really diligent, they're being really careful, they're double checking with me, they're making sure they're on the right track. And yes, in theory, they're doing this. But actually, what really is happening is that they're becoming dependent on your solutions and your direction rather than developing for themselves problem solving like muscles, which is actually what you need and I know you want in your business. So when you're constantly telling your team what to do, telling them what you found, telling them how to fix a mistake, telling them how to solve something, telling them what to do next, it creates this approval seeking or this checking dynamic instead of real ownership. It's like your team learns to start something, check with you, wait for direction, rather than actually operating independently. And when we talk about empowering your team, the getting them to operate in a way that holds responsibility and is independent is the key to that. And here's the really interesting thing. As your business grows, this telling approach will, of course, become increasingly unsustainable. And perhaps you're already there now. There will be, if there's not already, simply too much going on for you to be the answer person for everything and everyone. And this is what I see with my clients all the time. This feeling of frustration because you can't step away from the business without everything falling apart. Like this feeling that I can't close my computer at lunchtime because people need me in inverted commas in the afternoon, let alone if I go on holidays and I'm actually offline for 2 weeks. When you're constantly on call, putting out fires, answering questions, reviewing somebody, guiding somebody, helping somebody troubleshoot a problem. And I'm sure that you're also sitting there thinking, why can't they just handle these things without me? Whereas in reality, what's happened is that you may have unintentionally trained your team to rely on you for answers or to check in with you before, thinking or problem solving for themselves. So this is what can happen if you build a accidental culture of like ask and check. So what's the alternative? Well, first of all, it starts with you, and that is shifting your mindset from being the problem solver to becoming the question asker. Here's why this is so important. Questions activate thinking while answers shuts it down. When you tell someone what to do, their brain will go into execution mode. They'll be focused on following the directions, getting it done, and they won't think about understanding the why or developing the how. They think about getting it done, executing. But when you ask a thoughtful question, you invite them to think, to process, to tentatively come up with their own solutions or confidently come up with their own solutions and suggestions. And this is the critical difference that you need to wrap your head around if you want to hand over real responsibilities as opposed to handing over tasks for somebody to execute without thinking very much. Because there's a massive difference between a team member who can execute tasks versus somebody who truly owns their responsibilities of their role. One who needs constant direction, guidance, review, checking, and supervision versus, somebody who operates independently, holds themselves accountable, owns the role, really takes responsibility for it, and therefore requires minimal input from you after you've explained to them the bigger picture, what's required, and where you need them to take it. When you shift to asking questions, you're promoting the kind of proactivity and independent thinking that will give you space back in your diary and in your mind to be able to think, and therefore, in turn, to allow your business to scale. Because you're developing team members who can solve issues, improve processes, and drive projects forward, as well as execute without you always having to be in the room or on Slack or on a call. And this is what will reduce the exhaustion that comes with being a business owner when you're stuck in that constant solution provider mode. It's what will free you up to work on your business rather than constantly fighting fires and only just getting through your to-do list. Now, some business owners, some of my clients and my business friends, they worry that asking questions instead of just giving the answers that they know to be true can feel like either playing games or a waste of time. like you're withholding information or testing people unnecessarily. But that is not what this is about. So I really want to address that. This isn't about playing games or taking like the long route to the answer. It's about developing your team's thinking muscles. It's about creating an environment where growth and learning and proactivity and initiative happens, where people become more capable, they become more confident to make decisions, to move slightly outside the square, particularly with the things that aren't black and white, rather than becoming more dependent on you. Okay, let's look at how this works from a practical perspective and run through a few different scenarios. Let's say scenario one is you've got a team member who makes a mistake, right? The tell approach might sound like, hey, I noticed this mistake. You did this wrong. Next time, do it this way instead. Whereas the ask approach will look like, hey, I noticed this. What made you think this was the right thing to do? What led to this being the outcome? What options or things did you debate or think about when you were making the decision through this process? Can you see the difference? One shuts down their thinking and almost says to them, hey, remember to do this differently next time, and therefore creates dependency on your solutions and them remembering the right way to do it next time. Whereas the other opens up thinking. It allows them to reflect. It allows them to also share with you, oh, hey, I did it like this because if there was already some thinking involved. And therefore, you're supporting them to make a better judgment call next time. Let's look at another scenario. Let's say a project isn't moving forward and meeting the deadlines that it should. The tell approach might be something like, hey, here's what you need to do to get this project back on track. Do this, contact this person, create this document, schedule this meeting, do this, do this, do this. Whereas the ask approach sounds something like, hey, I've noticed this project has stalled and it doesn't look like we're going to meet this deadline. What do you see as the main obstacles happening right now on the project? Wait, pause. What do you think you could do differently to try and still meet that deadline or that outcome that we're going for? Can you think of anything that would help us get back on track here? Again, one's creating, reliance on you for the solutions to get the project back on track, whereas the other is developing their ability to identify obstacles, to navigate them, and to move forward independently from you. And I guess, you can already hear through these examples, it's almost like you can take your brain to, if I was on holidays, this is a great way for me to see how they would think without me. Okay, let's do scenario 3 when a performance issue arises. So let's say it's a salesperson and they've missed their numbers. The tell approach would be your numbers are down. You need to make more calls, get more meetings to achieve those numbers and make them consistently. The ask approach would look like, hey, I've noticed your numbers are down month on month. What do you think's going on? Waiting for the answer and then sharing with them a little bit of bigger picture or some why. So these numbers are important to the business because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe it affects quarterly goals. Maybe it feeds into something else. Let's brainstorm ways to support you to make them happen. What do you think you can do to lift these up again? Now, I know what you're probably thinking, and that might be, this sounds like it's going to take time. And you're right. It does definitely take more time than just telling the person the answer in the moment. But that is short-term time, because taking more time to go through the asking approach to get them to think is an investment of your time, which will pay off in dividends as your team build this thinking muscle. Each time you resist the urge to tell them what to do and instead ask a thoughtful question, you're building that capacity in your team to think and operate independently from you, which means you're creating a future business and a future team that is able to solve problems without you, show initiative without prompting, and own the outcomes and own their responsibilities rather than just executing tasks. And that makes taking holidays, closing your computer feel oh so much more possible. So some language frameworks that I share with my clients are things like, what led you to do that? What led you to decide that? What options did you consider at this point? What was your thinking here? What do you think you may have been able to do differently? If we think about this outcome and work backwards, what do you think could get us there? Can you think of a different way we could have explored this? Can you think of a different way you could have explored this? And then really link it into the bigger picture. So this is why this outcome, this number, this deadline is important to the business. So let's brainstorm together some ways to make that happen. I'm here to support you to make it happen. Let's brainstorm together. And then you don't give all the ideas in the brainstorming time. Now, I know completely that many of you are probably thinking, Paula, I don't have time for all these questions. It's definitely faster to just tell people what to do. And particularly if you have this pattern amongst a number of people on your team, I can get that you might be sitting there thinking, I can't go through this process with all of them. And I completely get it. You're busy. I'm busy. We're all busy. But it's the perspective shift that I invite you to consider. This is an investment. So, if you have multiple team members who are acting this way, choose one person to go through this process. As they get elevated, then maybe it's less of a load with question asking for them and you can move on to somebody else. When you're in a team meeting and people are asking questions, use that as a group opportunity to flip and start to ask. And you'll start to slowly, change the direction of the ship that way. Because yes, you might be investing a little bit more time through this asking process rather than telling the answer, but you're investing that time now to save massive amounts of time later, but also frankly to save your sanity because, answering questions, being the go-to person the whole time is exhausting and it's not sustainable. So I'd also like to offer that it needs to change, and investing through changing the way you are asking rather than telling it's the only way to get the change that you're after. And I guess if you think about the amount of time at the moment that you spend answering the same questions, fixing the same problems repeatedly, checking work that should have been done correctly in the first place, being pulled into issues that someone else should be handling, if you bundled that all up and you compared that, well, probably the amount of time that you need to spend asking rather than telling is actually less than the amount of time you're currently spending doing all that fixing and stuff anyway. Because when you invest in asking the questions that actually develop your team's thinking, you'll gradually eliminate all that time drain that comes from you having to be so involved. And you can create like a brighter future for yourself, knowing that what you're doing is taking tiny baby steps towards, a better team who are operating in a way that doesn't rely on you quite so much. So here's your challenge for the week. I want you to pick one conversation where you would normally tell someone the answers, someone who you expect should be able to think. So for example, don't do this with your offshore virtual assistant who, in their nature are really good at executing tasks. Choose the person who you wish could take more responsibility, who you wish was stepping up a little bit more, and choose one conversation with them this week where you would normally be, probably frustrated and time short and normally just tell them what to do, and use that as an experiment to ask questions instead. And just notice what happens, not just in the moment of the conversation, but in future interactions. Just notice, are they operating more independently? Are they bringing solutions instead of problems? Are they growing in their capacity to be able to handle situations? Are they showing me a tiny bit more proactivity and initiative than what they did before I started asking them questions? I believe you're going to see a big difference. And this shift from telling to asking is literally one of the most powerful leadership transformations I see happen in my clients. And it's a beautiful shift for me because in our first few calls, they'll come to me and they'll say to me, this is what happened, this is what I said, etc., etc. And then after a little while of us practicing this and them practicing this, they'll come back to me saying, they did this. And so I asked this and they said this and I asked this. And it's just such a beautiful transition because it's a skill that you can learn after you've decided to change, your normal response or your past response. So, we need the decision to change your mindset and then just the opportunity to ask rather than tell. And then you grasp that opportunity, you start to practice it, and it will become a lifelong leadership skill that will totally transform how involved and stuck in the weeds you are in your business on a day-to-day basis. So if you are ready to transform how you lead your team and create the kind of responsibility and ownership taking that actually frees you up to work on your business rather than in it, then of course I'd love to talk to you. You can book in a free Dream Team discovery call and we can chat about your specific situation, your team, and I'll share with you how I can help you to shift from telling to asking, because often it's learning the language that feels right for you and working through with somebody like me what you think you're going to get when you explore it, practicing it, and then the confidence and encouragement to actually go and apply it. And I would love to support you through that shift. Okay, so that is it for today. This is Paula Maidens from the Big Dreams, Great Teams podcast. Until next time, remember, great leaders ask, they don't tell. And a little teaser for the next episode, we'll be diving into the 3 questions that every business owner should be asking in team meetings to instantly boost accountability and performance. So, in the same sort of theme as today's episode, if you're tired of being the center point, the one who's, solving everything and the one who's driving results, then this is going to be a really great episode that you don't want to miss. Okay, that's all for today. I will be back here soon.